Solitude, a short story by Guy de Maupassant. We had been dining at the house of a friend, and the dinner had been very gay. After it broke up, one of the party, an old friend, said to me, "Let us take a stroll in the Champs-Élysées." I agreed, and we went out, slowly walking up the long promenade, under trees hardly yet covered with leaves. There was hardly a sound, save that confused and constant murmur which Paris makes. A fresh breeze fanned our faces, and a legion of stars were scattered over the black sky like a golden powder. My companion said to me, "I do not know why, but I breathe better here at night than anywhere else. It seems to me that my thoughts are enlarged. I have, at times, a sort of glimmering in my soul that makes me believe, for a second, that the divine secret of things is about to be discovered. Then the window is closed, and my vision is ended." From time to time we saw two shadows glide along the length of the thickets. Then we passed a bench, where two people, seated side by side, made but one black spot. My friend murmured, "Poor things. They do not inspire me with disgust, but with an immense pity. Among all the mysteries of human life, there is one which I have penetrated. Our great torment in this existence comes from the fact that we are eternally alone. All our efforts and all our actions are directed toward escaping this solitude. Those two lovers there on the benches in the open air are seeming, as all creatures are seeking, to make their isolation cease, if only for a minute or less. They are living and always will live alone, and we also. This is more or less apparent to all of us. For some time I have endured this abominable pain of having understood, of having discovered the frightful solitude in which I live, and I know that nothing can make it cease. Nothing. Do you hear? Whatever we may attempt, whatever we may do, whatever may be the misery of our hearts, the appeal of our lips, the clasp of our arms, we are always alone. I have asked you to walk tonight so that I shall not have to enter my own house, because now I suffer horribly from the solitude of my home. What good does it do me? I speak to you, you listen to me, yet we are both alone, side by side, but alone. You understand? Blessed are the poor in spirit, say the scriptures. They have the illusion of happiness. They do not feel our solitary misery. They do not wander, as I do, through life, without contact save of elbows, without joy save the egotistic satisfaction of understanding, of seeing, of divining, and of suffering eternally from the knowledge of our never-ending isolation. You think me slightly deranged, do you not? Listen to me. Since I have felt the solitude of my being, it seems to me that I am daily sinking more deeply into a dark vault, whose sides I cannot find, whose end I do not know, and which perhaps has no end. I sink without anyone with me, or around me, without any living person making this same gloomy journey. This vault is life. Sometimes I hear noises, voices, confused sounds, but I never know exactly from whom they come. I never meet anybody. I never find another hand in this darkness that surrounds me. Do you understand? Some men have occasionally divined this frightful suffering. De Musset has written, "Who comes? Who calls me? No one. I am alone. 1 o'clock strikes. Oh, solitude! Oh, misery!" But with him there is only a passing doubt, and not a definite certainty as with me. He was a poet. He peopled life with fantasies, with dreams. He was never really alone. I am alone. Gustave Flaubert, one of the great unfortunates of this world, because he was on of the great lights, wrote to a friend this despairing phrase, "We are all in a desert. Nobody understands anybody." No, nobody understands anybody. Whatever one thinks, whatever one says, whatever one attempts, does the earth know what passes in those stars that are hurled like a spark of fire across the firmament, so far that we perceive only the splendor of some? Think of the innumerable army of others lost in infinitude, so near to each other that they form perhaps a whole, as the molecules of a body. Well, man does not know what passes in another many anymore. We are farther from one another than the stars, and far more isolated, because thought is unfathomable. Do you know anything more frightful than this constant contact with beings that we cannot penetrate? We love one another as if we were fettered, very close, with extended arms, without succeeding in reaching one another. A torturing need of union hampers us, but all our efforts remain barren, our abandonment useless, our confidences unfruitful, our embraces powerless, our caresses vain. When we wish to join each other, our sudden emotions make us only clash against each other. I never feel myself more alone than when I open my heart to some friend, because I then better understand the insuperable obstacle. He is there, my friend. I see his clear eyes above me, but the soul behind them I do not see. He listens to me. What is he thinking? Yes, what is he thinking? You do not understand this torment? He hates me, perhaps, or scorns me, or mocks me. He reflects upon what I have said. He judges me. He rails at me. He condemns me, and considers me either very mediocre or a fool. How am I to know what he thinks? How am I to know whether he loves me as I love him, and what is at work in that little round head? What a mystery is the unknown thought of a being, the hidden and independent thought that we can neither know nor control, neither command, not conquer. And I have wished in vain to give myself up entirely, to open all the doors of my soul, and I do not succeed in giving myself up. I still remain in the very depth, the secret abode of me, where no one can penetrate, no one can discover it or enter there, because no one resembles me, because no one understands anyone. You, at least, understand me at this moment. No, you think I am mad. You examine me. You shrink from me. You ask yourself, what's the matter with him tonight? But if you succeed in seizing, in divining one day my horrible and subtle suffering, come to me and say only, I have understood you, and you will make me happy, for a second, perhaps. Women make me still more conscious of my solitude. Misery, misery, how I have suffered through women, because they, more than men, have often given me the illusion of not being alone. When one falls in love, it seems as though one expands. A superhuman felicity envelopes you. Do you know why? Do you know why you feel then this sensation of exceeding happiness? It is simply because one imagines himself no longer alone. Isolation, the abandonment of the human being, seems to cease. What an error! More tormented even than we by this eternal need of life which gnaws at our solitary heart are women, the great delusion and the dream. You know those delicious hours passed face to face with a being with long hair, charming features, and a look that exited us to live. What delirium misleads our mind? What illusion carries us away? Does it not seem that presently our soul shall form but one? But this, presently, never comes, and after weeks of waiting, of hope, and of deceptive joy, you find yourself again, one day more alone than you have ever been before. After each kiss, after each embrace, the isolation is increased, and how frightfully one suffers. Has not Sully Prudhomme written, caresses are only restless transports, fruitless attempts of poor love which essay the impossible union of souls by the bodies. And then, goodbye. It is over. One hardly recognizes the woman who has been everything to us for a moment of life, and whose thoughts, intimate and commonplace, undoubtedly, we have never known. At the very hour when it would seem, in that mysterious accord of beings, in the complete intermingling of ideas and of aspirations, that you were sounding the very depth of her soul, one word only, sometimes, will reveal your error, will show you, like a flash of lightning in the night, the black abyss between you. And still, that which is best in the world is to pass a night near a woman you love, without speaking, completely happy in the sole sensation of her presence. Ask no more, for two beings have never yet been united. As to myself, no, I have closed my soul. I tell no more to anybody what I believe, what I think, or what I love. Knowing myself condemned to this horrible solitude, I look upon things without expressing my opinion. What matter to me, opinions, quarrels, pleasures, or beliefs? Being unable to participate with anyone, I have withdrawn myself from all. My invisible self lives unexplored. I have common phrases for answers to the questions of each day, and a smile which says, yes, when I do not even wish to take the trouble of speaking. Do you understand? We had traversed the long avenue to the Arc de Triomphe, and had then walked back to the Place de la Concorde, for he had said all this slowly, adding many other things which I no longer remember. He stopped, and stretching his arm toward the great granite obelisk standing on the pavement of Paris, losing its long Egyptian profile in the night of the stars, an exiled monument, bearing on its side the history of its country written in strange signs, said brusquely, "Look, we are all like that stone." Then he left me without adding a word. Was he intoxicated? Was he mad? Was he wise? I do not yet know. Sometimes it seems to me that he was right. Sometimes it seems to me that he had lost his mind. The Piece of String, a short story by Guy de Maupassant. It was market day, and over all the roads round Goderville, the peasants and their wives were coming towards the town. The men walked easily, lurching the whole body forward at every step. Their long legs were twisted and deformed by the slow, painful labours of the country, by bending over to plough, which is what also makes their left shoulders too high and their figures crooked-head, and by reaping corn, which obliges them for steadiness' sake to spread their knees too wide. Their starched blue blouses, shining as though varnished, ornamented at collar and cuffs with little patterns of white stitchwork, and blown up big around their bony bodies, seemed exactly like balloons about to soar, but putting forth a head, two arms, and 2 feet. Some of these fellows dragged a cow or a calf at the end of a rope, and just behind the animal, beating it over the back with a leaf-covered branch to hasten its pace, went their wives, carrying large baskets from which came forth the heads of chickens or the heads of ducks. These women walked with steps far shorter and quicker than the men. Their figures, withered and upright, were adorned with scanty little shawls pinned over their flat bosoms, and they enveloped their heads each in a white cloth, close fastened round the hair and surmounted by a cap. Now a char à banc passed by, drawn by a jerky-paced nag. It shook up strangely the 2 men on the seat, and the woman at the bottom of the cart held fast to its sides to lessen the hard joltings. In the marketplace at Goderville was a great crowd, a mingled multitude of men and beasts. The horns of cattle, the high and long-napped hats of wealthy peasants, the head-dresses of the women came to the surface of that sea, and voices, clamorous, sharp, shrill, made a continuous and savage din. Above it, a huge burst of laughter from the sturdy lungs of a merry yokel would sometimes sound, and sometimes a long bellow from a cow tied fast to the wall of a house. It all smelled of the stable, of milk, of hay, and of perspiration, giving off that half-human, half-animal odour which is peculiar to the men of the fields. Maître Hochecorne of Bréauté had just arrived at Goderville, and was taking his way towards the square, when he perceived on the ground a little piece of string. Maître Hochecorne, economical, like all true Normans, reflected that everything was worth picking up which could be of any use, and he stooped down, but painfully, because he suffered from rheumatism. He took the bit of thin cord from the ground, and was carefully preparing to roll it up when he saw Maître Malandin, the harness-maker, on his doorstep, looking at him. They had once had a quarrel about a halter, and they had remained angry, bearing malice on both sides. Maitre Hochecorn was overcome with a sort of shame at being seen by his enemy looking in the dirt, so for a bit of string. He quickly hid his find beneath his blouse, then in the pocket of his breeches, then pretended to be still looking for something on the ground which he did not discover, and at last went off towards the marketplace, with his head bent forward and a body almost doubled in two by rheumatic pains. He lost himself immediately in the crowd, which was clamorous, slow, and agitated by interminable bargains. The peasants examined the cows, went off, came back, always in great perplexity and fear of being cheated, never quite daring to decide, spying at the eye of the seller, trying ceaselessly to discover the tricks of the man and the defect in the beast. The women, having placed their great baskets at their feet, had pulled out the poultry, which lay upon the ground, tied by the legs, with eyes scared, with combs scarlet. They listened to propositions, maintaining their prices, with a dry manner, with an impassible face. Or suddenly, perhaps deciding to take the lower price which was offered, they cried out to the customer, who was departing slowly, "All right, I'll let you have them, mate and team." Then, little by little, the square became empty, and when the Angelus struck midday, those who lived at a distance poured into the inns. At Jurden's the great room was filled with eaters, just as the vast court was filled with vehicles of every sort: wagons, gigs, char-à-bancs, tilburys, tilt carts which have no name, yellow with mud, misshapen, pieced together, raising their shafts to heaven like two arms, or it may be with their nose in the dirt and their rear in the air. Just opposite to where the diners were at table, the huge fireplace, full of clear flame, threw a lively heat on the backs of those who sat along the right. 3 spits were turning, loaded with chickens, with pigeons, and with joints of mutton, and a delectable odour of roast meat, of gravy gushing over crisp brown skin, took wing from the hearth, kindled merriment, caused mouths to water. All the aristocracy of the plough were eating there, at Mate Jourdain's, the innkeeper's, a dealer in horses also, and a sharp fellow who had made a pretty penny in his day. The dishes were passed round, were emptied, with jugs of yellow cider. Everyone told of his affairs, of his purchases and his sales. They asked news about the crops. The weather was good for greenstuffs, but a little wet for wheat. All of a sudden, the drum rolled in the court before the house. Everyone, except some of the most indifferent, was on his feet at once, and ran to the door, to the windows, with his mouth still full and his napkin in his hand. When the public crier had finished his tattoo, he called forth in a jerky voice, making his pauses out of time, "Be it known to the inhabitants of Gaudeville, and in general to all persons present at the market, that there has been lost this morning, on the Bewsville road, between 9 and 10 o'clock, a pocketbook of black leather containing 500 francs and business papers. You are requested to return it to the mayor's office at once, or Maître Fortuné Hulbrec of Manneville. There will be 20 francs reward." Then the man departed. They heard once more at a distance the dull beatings on the drum and the faint voice of the crier. Then they began to talk of this event, reckoning up the chances which Maître Hulbrec had of finding or of not finding his pocketbook again. And the meal went on. They were finishing their coffee when the corporal of gendarmes appeared on the threshold. "Is Maître Hochecorn of Bréauté here?" Maître Hochecorn, seated at the other end of the table, answered, "Here I am." And the corporal resumed, "Maître Hochecorn, will you have the kindness to come with me to the mayor's office? Monsieur le Maire would like to speak to you." The peasant, surprised and uneasy, gulped down his little glass of cognac, got up, and, even worse, bent over than in the morning, since the first steps after a rest were always particularly difficult, started off, repeating, "Here I am, here I am," and he followed the corporal. The mayor was waiting for him, seated in an armchair. He was the notary of the place, a tall, grave man of pompous speech. "Maître Hochecorn," said he, "this morning, on the Bewsville road, you were seen to pick up the pocketbook lost by Maître Hulbrec of Manneville." The countryman, speechless, regarded the mayor, frightened already by this suspicion which rested on him, he knew not why. I, I picked up that pocketbook. Yes, you. I swear I didn't even know nothing about it at all. You were seen. They saw me. Me? Who is that who saw me? Monsieur Malandin, the harness maker. Then the old man remembered, understood, and reddening with anger. Ah, he saw me, did he, the rascal? He saw me picking up this string here, Monsieur le Maire. And fumbling at the bottom of his pocket, he pulled out of it the little end of string. But the mayor incredulously shook his head. You will not make me believe, Maître Hochecorne, that Monsieur Malandin, who is a man worthy of credit, has mistaken this string for a pocketbook. The peasant, furious, raised his hand and spit, as if to attest his good faith, repeating, For all that, it is the truth of the good God, the blessed truth, Monsieur le Maire. There, on my soul and my salvation, I repeat it. The mayor continued, After having picked up the thing in question, you even looked for some time in the mud to see if a piece of money had not dropped out of it. The good man was suffocated with indignation and with fear. If they can say, such lies as that to slander an honest man. If they can say, he might protested he was not believed. He was confronted with Monsieur Malandin, who repeated and sustained his testimony. They abused one another for an hour. At his own request, Maître Hochecorne was searched. Nothing was found upon him. At last, the mayor, much perplexed, sent him away, warning him that he would inform the public prosecutor and ask for orders. The news had spread. When he left the mayor's office, the old man was surrounded, interrogated with a curiosity which was serious or mocking as the case might be, but into which no indignation entered. And he began to tell the story of the string. They did not believe him. They laughed. He passed on, buttonholed by everyone, himself buttonholing his acquaintances, beginning over and over again his tale and his protestations, showing his pockets turned inside out to prove that he had nothing. They said to him, "You old rogue, va!" He grew angry, exasperated, feverish, in despair at not being believed, and always telling his story. The night came. It was time to go home. He set out with 3 of his neighbors, to whom he pointed out the place where he had picked up the end of string, and all the way he talked of his adventure. That evening he made the round in the village of Bréauté, so as to tell everyone. He met only unbelievers. He was ill of it all night long. The next day, about 1 in the afternoon, Marius Paumel, a farmhand of Maître Breton, the market gardener at Imoville, returned the pocketbook and its contents to Maître Hulbrecht of Manville. This man said, indeed, that he had found it on the road, but not knowing how to read, he had carried it home and given it to his master. The news spread to the environs. Maître Hochecorne was informed. He put himself at once upon the go and began to relate his story as completed by the denouement. He triumphed. What grieved me, said he, was not the thing itself, do you understand, but it was the lies. There's nothing does you so much harm as being in disgrace for lying. All day he talked of his adventure. He told it on the roads to the people who passed, at the cabaret to the people who drank, and the next Sunday, when they came out of church. He even stopped strangers to tell them about it. He was easy now, and yet something worried him without his knowing exactly what it was. People had a joking manner while they listened. They did not seem convinced. He seemed to feel their tittle-tattle behind his back. On Tuesday of the next week, he went to market at Gaudeville, prompted entirely by the need of telling his story. Malandin, standing on his doorstep, began to laugh as he saw him pass. Why? He accosted a farmer of Sictieto, who did not let him finish, and giving him a punch in the pit of his stomach, cried in his face, "Oh, you great rogue, va!" then turned his heel upon him. Maître Hochecorne remained speechless, and grew more uneasy. Why had they called him Great Rogue? When seated at table in Jourdan's tavern, he began again to explain the whole affair. A horse dealer of Montevilliers shouted at him, "Get out! Get out, you old scamp. I know all about your string. Horshacorn stammered. But since they found it again, the pocketbook. But the other continued. Hold your tongue, Daddy. There's one who finds it, and there's another who returns it. Add no one the wiser. The peasant was choked. He understood at last. They accused him of having had the pocketbook brought back by an accomplice, by a confederate. He tried to protest. The whole table began to laugh. He could not finish his dinner and went away amid a chorus of jeers. He went home, ashamed and indignant, choked with rage, with confusion, the more cast down since from his Norman cunning he was, perhaps, capable of having done what they accused him of, and even of boasting of it as a good trick. His innocence dimly seemed to him impossible to prove, his craftiness being so well known, and he felt himself struck to the heart by the injustice of the suspicion. Then he began anew to tell of his adventure, lengthening his recital every day, each time adding new proofs, more energetic protestations, and more solemn oaths which he thought of, which he prepared in his hours of solitude, his mind being entirely occupied by the story of the string. The more complicated his defense, the more artful his arguments, the less he was believed. "Those are liars' proofs," they said behind his back. He felt this. It preyed upon his heart. He exhausted himself in useless efforts. He was visibly wasting away. The jokers now made him tell the story of the piece of string to amuse them, just as you make a soldier who has been on a campaign tell his story of the battle. His mind, struck at the root, grew weak. About the end of December he took to his bed. He died early in January, and, in the delirium of the death agony, he protested his innocence, repeating, "A little bit of string, a little bit of string. See, here it is, Monsieur le Maire."